Welcome to Century 21 Leading Edge podcast. Just want to give you guys a quick explanation as to what we're doing here with the podcast. A lot of times in the real estate industry, agents need to look at what's going on in the industry, looking at best practices, and that's really what this is all about. We get together with the three owners, and today we have a guest. Actually, Kathleen Black from Kathleen Black Coaching is with us today. And welcome, Kathleen.
Thank you.
And so we're going to talk a little bit about training today, but really looking at what are the best practices in the industry so that you as agents don't need to go through that process. And we get together, talk about those things to try to help you to basically achieve more in your business. So without further ado, let's introduce ourselves. Go ahead, Tas.
I'm Tasis Giannakakis, and I'm one of the partners at Century 21 Leading Edge.
Anthony.
That's right, Anthony Bungaro, broker and partner at Century 21 Leading Edge.
Great. And Kathleen, if you can introduce yourself.
Yeah, I'm Kathleen Black, and I run Kathleen Black Coaching and Consulting.
Perfect. I forgot the consulting part, right? There you go. So what we want to do tonight, I guess, is to start with our guest and welcome you to our podcast. And, basically start by putting you on the spot to tell us a little bit about what you've done with Century 21 Leading Edge, specifically with your coaching program. So give us a little bit of an overview on what you've done.
Well, I think I'm trying to think how many years it's been now since we started. Initially, we were running an Elite Business Builder training program, which is a program that it kind of replicates the onboarding that we do with teams. So preparing an agent to come onto a team and be very successful with, leads or marketing from any source, like to help them hit the ground running very quickly. But the Elite Business Builder mixed, your business model, NLP learning styles. It mixed a lot to create a mindset for expansion. So we could kind of lay the foundation for team expansion later for agents, which has been really neat at Leading Edge because we've actually seen many teams or people who took that program expand into teams, which actually has been really fulfilling for me to see, and that they still reach out and they have that mindset of expansion. And now most recently we're running, and I actually don't know what you're calling it, Paul, the new program. But the new program is a lot more intensive, right? Because it's got Renee Prasenko, who's gone through coaching with us over the years and trained agents on her team again and again. So she actually has a really high level of coaching and training that is much closer to our onboarding process. So it's really exciting because she can get agents much closer to kind of ready to go with online leads or other marketing sources.
Perfect. Very good. So what kind of feedback have you guys had from agents that are in the Kathleen's program?
I think that the agents that have taken the programs that we've run all enjoyed it. I think that a few of the comments that I got, Kathleen, was they really enjoyed understanding the psychology, right? And I think you dig deep on that and understanding what, as an agent, you need to understand on psychology of a buyer or a seller, right? To kind of help them through that decision. Because we all have seen people, especially first-time buyers, they do a deal, and the next morning they wake up in a cold sweat, freaking out, and oh my God, I did the wrong thing, right? So I think as realtors, it's important to understand where those emotions are coming from, right? And I think that agents have commented that you do a fabulous job on educating them on that, right? So that's some of the feedback I've gotten.
Sure. How about you, Anthony?
No, just to piggyback onto that, Kathleen, the feedback, what I got from agents is they like the real side of it, because what I got was that when I say the real side of it, you're dealing with human beings, the client. So you did portray, and initially on your program I did attend, and I could see that, and that's what was important, because when you're sitting face to face with people, yes, there's scripts and how do you handle objections and all that type of training is very important, but that is real, and how do you respond to that? So that was kind of the feedback we got. And as you said, to this day we've got people that are formulating teams. They want to get it together. So we're very privileged to be able to say, look, we've got another class coming up and we're looking forward to see if we can get these people involved with that. Takes a lot of pressure off, man.
Sure, absolutely. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to interject and introduce our wines tonight, or the first couple anyway. So tonight we're doing a Chilean wine tasting. We have 3 wines from Chile. The first one is the Purple Angel, which I think at our tournaments has been a very popular wine that we've had. I don't have enough of it to have at a tournament. That's why it wasn't there this year. This is the last bottle I have of the Purple Angel. A little bit hard to get. So why don't we just give that one a little bit of a swirl and a try. That's the one on the left. Yep, you got it.
Cheers.
Excellent. Doesn't disappoint.
Doesn't disappoint. There you go. What do you think, Kathleen? Excellent. Okay. So the Purple Angel, I think, is a grape called the Canamere. And the second one also has that. And then the third wine that we're going to try from Chile is a Cabernet Sauvignon. So we've got a little bit of a different mix. The other thing that I was just going to talk about a little bit here, just on our wine education, is the idea of looking at the cork. So when you get a wine open for you in a restaurant, a lot of times the sommelier will hand you the cork, right? And some people wonder, what am I supposed to do with that? They smell it, right? The idea when looking at a cork is that there is the wine stain on the bottom, but that there's no leakage. That's what you're really looking for. Is the cork intact, right? And that's an important thing to look for. The other thing is if you're trying a bottle of wine that was amazing and you want to remember it, you just take the cork and the name of the wine is on the cork, and you put the cork in your pocket and you're good. You know what wine you tried. So that's the purpose. That's the purpose of the cork. So for each of the wines tonight, I just pulled out the cork just to have a quick inspection to see that the wine was stored properly. And why we're looking at the purple or the wine stain on the cork is that if a bottle was laid down properly and stored properly, it's going to have that stain. If it was standing up the whole life, it's not going to have that stain, and that's a little bit of a problem. So you want that cork to be moist and not worn out.
If it's stained further down into the cork, Paul, that's a problem?
Yeah, so really the integrity of the cork. So if there is leakage through, right, air is the challenge for wine, right? Air wrecks wine. That's why when you open a bottle of wine, it doesn't last forever, because the air causes the tannins to mellow and it causes it to fizzle out. It's actually funny, I tried one time. I had a neighbor down the road that her husband passed away, unfortunately, and they had a huge amount of wine that was 50 and 60 years old, right? And she says, I have no idea if it's any good, right? So I said, okay, I was super excited to see what this wine was. And what's really interesting is that we opened it, most of it was already gone, right? So the lifespan of wine, based on the tannins or the quality of the wine, the longer, the better the quality, the longer the life a lot of times. But what was interesting with that is that when you poured it into the glass and you took a sip, it was good. Within minutes of it being in the air, it turned completely flat and tasteless, right? So it was just coming out of the bottle, you had a little bit of life, but that oxidation with the air when it came out, because it was past its prime, it was done.
So it accelerates it.
It accelerates it, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So would it last, just on that note, Paul, would it last longer if the bottle is tilted into the cork? Is that a rule of thumb? Like you can just stand up a bottle of wine, right? And if you had the same one, because that's what I was wondering, to get the answer, if there is an answer to that.
Yeah, so the idea is that before a bottle is opened, there is no air in it. There's usually just a little bit of a space there, right? Yeah. So they put the cork in and they suck the air out of it. So once it's opened, whether you lean it towards the cork, then there's air at the bottom, which is oxidizing the wine. If you stand it straight up, so it's irrelevant. What you really want to do, and what I do at home, is I have a cork that you put in, and then you use this little device to suck the air out of the bottle, right? So you actually cork it and then take all the air out of the bottle, and then it'll last, 3-4 days. So once wine is opened, you need to drink it. And somebody sent me something on that sort of way to put this little device into the wine to pour it, and I just send them back a message. I really just drink the whole bottle. And then you don't have to worry about that, right? So that's
For storage.
for storage.
For storage, before you open it.
Before you
Say
open
it's
it.
in your
Cellar, or it's in your house. Is it okay just to let it sit there like
No,
this?
it's not. It's not. So you yes, it's actually important that the wine is touching the cork, which keeps it moist. It's also important for there to be 40% humidity in the room that you're storing the wine, and 55 degrees Fahrenheit or 15 Celsius is the temperature that you want to store wine at. So you got to keep it at that temperature on its side, and then it'll last longer, right? Yeah. So there you go. So that's our wine lesson. So what I just want to talk further with Kathleen on the team concept. So I was down in Las Vegas, I guess last month, right? At Inman, and there was a bunch of presentations done on team and team building, and it's interesting that they did a study and interviewed a lot of agents, and in that survey they found that 26% of the agents were either on teams or looking at joining a team. And a lot of the talk at this conference was the fact that brokerages in general don't know how to manage teams. They're a lot of times threatened by teams, so they're not team friendly, right? And I think that we're a brokerage that's team friendly, and we'll expand on that a little bit. But also the fact that Kathleen is actually a team coach, right? I mean, that is I guess you do coach non-teams?
Oh, for sure. No, we coach individual agents and team, but our niche is team, definitely.
And I think that's important, because when you look at the higher level trainings that we did and the amount of detail and difference for a realtor to run a team, and this is why I think so many teams have challenges, right? They're dysfunctional, like a lot of families, right? And they're dysfunctional because you now have to manage all these people. You have to manage the business. So it is a completely different process. So we obviously want to get training on it. So I'm going to get Kathleen to just tell us a little bit about what are the differences from coaching a team or helping a team as opposed to helping an individual. What do you think are the major differences?
That's a good question. I mean, I think, coaching a team is like, it's like growing a small business. It's like any other small business, right? It's like you need an entrepreneur, you need somebody, like you said, who's a manager. And I find a lot of people who are top producers aren't necessarily managers, and they don't necessarily love being managers. I mean, even myself in my business, I don't thrive in the management side, but in coaching side, I do. I have no problem with it. So I think it's, realizing what our strengths are and what our weaknesses are. So for team, I mean, you're challenged to face your strengths and weaknesses with other people right in your face, which is very, very different. Versus, an individual agent, you're faced with your strengths or weaknesses with a buyer or seller, but the longevity of that is very different. So I think with individual agents, we're focused on the momentum, we're focused on accountability, we're focused on their conversion, we're tracking everything so that if there's any areas where they're struggling, we can try to pick it up as quick as possible. For a team, we're looking at that data across like maybe 25 people, right? And we're looking at a support side and a sales side, and we're looking at business planning and budgeting and profit and loss, right? Like there's just so many aspects, and motivation for a team, right? Because you don't want to say the same thing every single Monday. You want your team to be excited, and you want them to know a strategy. And if you're still selling and you're running all the time, it's really hard to clearly communicate a strategy to a team when your head's in 20 different directions, right? So I find we really help our teams like ground, because a coaching call can be consistent grounding, right? Whereas, you're running a lot. So when we can get a team leader to selling a little bit less, working on the business a little bit more, I find that's where the relief comes. But some aspects are the same, but for a team, I mean, it's a huge umbrella, really, like any small business, in my opinion.
Yeah. So you mentioned that you're not good at the management side of things.
I discovered this.
Yes. So I think there's a lot of team leaders that also aren't. Yeah. So do you guys suggest hiring and bringing in the proper person to manage the team as opposed to them doing it? Is that?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's one of the reasons too that I'm transparent about it. I never really, because I want other people to feel okay, that you don't have to be a great manager to have an amazing team. Like, I'm a driver. I love the energy. I love the vision. So I had to hustle to get big enough to bring in people who will manage for me now. So I can help other people that, hey, if we can get you through these pinch periods, you can get there. You don't have to do it forever. And to be honest, until I got big enough that I wasn't as much in the business, which is the same as our team leaders, I didn't really know because I didn't have time to slow down and to know. But when it started to hurt the business, we needed to expand, then you see it. So I don't think initially, what I'm trying to say is when you're trying to build the team, you're usually wearing lots of hats and you have to manage. You don't have a choice. You just have to do what you need to do. Once you get big enough that you want to expand, that's when you want to go, wait, am I the driver? Am I the manager? Like what role can I offer the most value, right?
And understanding where your strengths are, right? For sure, because I think with a lot of teams, it starts off with someone who has success in selling, and that's great, but when you get to a point where you have multiple people, now just staffing in itself, a lot of times someone that's great at selling might not be the best person on dealing with the staffing or dealing with the admin part of a team or a brokerage or anything in that case, right? So they are multiple hats for sure. So that's great that you guys recognize that and provide the training for it, right? So.
Well, I think you said the training. It was just the training. I didn't even mention that. Like for some agents, like we have some team leaders who really they loathe training. They don't like it, and they're very happy to leverage it off. And other ones don't quite know how to do it. And like you said before, I mean, the psychology is such a big part. Like we train belief before we train content. If I can have somebody see the industry the way we do, believe the things we believe, it's so easy to train. But if you skip that piece, they're just fighting it all the time because they don't believe what you believe, right?
Yeah. So what I find and what we've actually tried to do with your program that is a little bit different. So I think that when I first came to you, we were looking at having you coach the office team, right? And
that's right.
So this was a little bit of a different approach, and we actually run a lead gen program at Century 21 Leading Edge. And in order to qualify for lead gen, in order to get company leads, you have to go through Kathleen's program and pass and do the test, right, which is to present to me and pass, and then you qualify for leads. So that's a little bit different, and I think that it's also the same because it is the company basically generating the leads, being the rainmaker, and then trying to get these agents to do it. And from that, what we do is we tend to get a lot of people that have branched off from that, got into coaching with you, developed teams, and moved on from there. So actually, just to mention it, we actually have the next program actually starting on September 19th. And it's going to be an 8-week program, and we're going to have Kathleen at the bookends of that program like we did the last time, and we continue to evolve the program as we go, trying to look at utilizing you for the areas that your time is valuable, to utilize you for that start and finish, getting the right mindset, and then finishing touches on the whole process. And then we're using, as you mentioned, Renee, to do that boot camp part of it through the program. And Renee has also been in coaching with your program for a number of years, and obviously has a great understanding. And it's also great. We just had one of our agents that posted on Facebook the other day that they reluctantly took the course, right? And it's interesting because we tell people and managers are constantly working on getting people to get involved in these programs. And this was a guy that missed it 2 or 3 times, and then he reluctantly said, "Okay, I'll do it." And of course, leads, sometimes it's luck, sometimes it's the skill, or sometimes it's a bit of both. So he ended up with a buy and a sell from the first lead that we set up for him, made $25,000 commission on the buy. on the first deal that he got from our lead program. So his point was that was the best $395 he ever spent, what was to get that from the program, right? So how have you found with Century 21 and sort of coaching and dealing with people that aren't really on a team different? Have you noticed challenges with your programs with that, or has it been similar?
I think I haven't noticed challenges with it. I'm just trying to think if it's the same. I think the intensity, like some agents haven't been through that intensity of training, right? Like the mindset side of it and the accountability. So I think for agents who aren't on a team, I think my goals are, to instill like capability and confidence and clarity, right? So when you're with a client, like what is the clarity of the problem we're really trying to solve? Because it's often not what we think it is, right? Like somebody, like you said, comes in, they want to buy a house, but there's 10 steps before they're actually confident enough to buy that house. So how can we get clarity on how to support, educate the client every step of the way so that they're really confident at the end of the day, and when they see the right house, they do make that move. And I think that's a piece that we spend more time on with agents who don't come from teams, because often when you're coming from a team, I might be biased, I totally say that. This is not true for all teams. Maybe just, I don't know if it's our network or what, but often teams, there's more training, there's some more expectations, we're watching the tracking a little bit more, but when you're out there on your own and you're just figuring it out, right, it's hard to have that like clear step-by-step bullseye and certainty on what to do, what to say, and how to say it, that all clicks. Like one big puzzle that all clicks together is
Right.
what we're looking.
Yeah, and it's interesting when you look at the training aspect of it, and a lot of teams don't want to train their people. And what we find is that it's better for them not to train them. And we try to get our teams, and many of them have been in coaching with you, but a lot of them have put their agents through your program and other programs that we've offered at Century 21 Leading Edge. And the idea is, don't train your agents. Hire the best people, the best trainers out there to train your people. Now, you also need to attend and understand the system and make sure that it's what you want, but that really is the best way to go. I was speaking with another Century 21 brokerage, and they do all their own training. And I asked them, why do you do that, and what results do you get? And they were adamant that it was the best training out there. And again, when you talk about accountability, training is a measured thing. And that particular company had a production of 4.2 transactions per person per year. And at that time, Leading Edge had a production of 13 transactions per person per year. And then if we separate the people that had been through the training, then it was up over 20 transactions per person per year. So it's interesting that the people that are trained are the ones that are more successful. Now,
in the pudding, for
that's
sure.
right. Now, the most important question that I have for you tonight, Kathleen, is how can we convince the agents that seem to be looking for miracles as opposed to getting off their keisters and doing something? They don't take the training, they talk about all kinds of negativity, and they don't do it. So what can we do with those people? What are the solutions for that?
Well, I think certainty precedes action, right? And if you get certain enough, you're going to take action. And if it's positive, you'll keep taking action. So for me, we all know energy, motion stays in motion, right? So if you can go in an environment where you increase your certainty and your belief again, then you're much more likely to do something. So training allows us to do that. It becomes that voice in our mind. I talked about this on Facebook yesterday or today. I don't know which day, it's a blur. But how when all throughout my day, I'll go to do something and I'll have different, books I've read or speakers I've heard, and they're there and I hear them, and it causes me to do little things quite differently in my business every single day, and it's literally transformed my life because I'm constantly having those positive voices in my head. And I think it's one of the most important things we can do. Those we surround ourselves with become us, right? So yeah, I think come in a training environment where you can increase your certainty, feel confident when you're taking action, and feel confident you can take your time back. For a lot of the agents that I work with, the number one thing, whether you're a team or individual, is time. And I relate to that, right? When I was selling as a single mother, like I didn't have a choice but to be efficient. And I think it's important to say, hey, you can do this business and be more efficient. You can make money, you can support your family, you can live your dreams. Like we are in a fantastic industry. So for me, it's that certainty that it's not going to take my life and take me down. It's actually going to propel me. Some people I think hold back because of the time factor. They're a little bit scared of leaning into the business because they think it'll take over their life. I think if you have the right systems, you can really use the business to build your life instead of the reverse.
I think that taking action is the biggest challenge, right? Anytime we've done your program or other programs, management as a group, we get out there and on the phones and, hey, you got to take this. And I can't tell you the amount of excuses that we get, Kathleen, right? Anything from, oh, I can't afford it, or I'll do it next time you run it, or,
The dog ate the converter.
yeah, the dog ate my shoes, so I can't leave the house today, whatever, right? So it is, I agree with you. I think we all agree that if we can get everybody to training, they will improve and they will be better and they will do better, right? I think that a lot of times for us, the challenge is to get them there, right? Any suggestions on that?
You still, anybody who's successful invests in themselves. Like all the time still, how many times on Real Estate Hacks, why do they have a coach? They're so successful. It's like almost all the top people have a coach. That's part of how they're successful. Like I wouldn't be anywhere if I didn't invest in myself. I've invested literally probably more than definitely more than 100,000 in personal development, and I'll keep investing because when I expand, my world expands, right? So yeah, I mean, you can keep doing it's choices and changes.
I find it
right?
interesting when people say, oh, I did that program, and then the ones that say they've done the program but they haven't had improvement, they really didn't get the program, or maybe they signed up for the program, didn't come to all the classes, didn't get involved. Because the truth is, I tell everybody, I've been doing this for 29 years. I go to all kinds of stuff and always, always, always learn something new. So how can someone who's just started doing real estate not learn something at a training program, right? Especially yours. It doesn't make sense, right? So
I think the key thing is implementation, right?
yeah.
And we've had people that have gone through it and implemented nothing. And I've even said to people, what percentage did you implement? They think about it, well, I really didn't implement any of it.
Yeah.
Okay, so do it again and implement it all. The other thing that I think is unique and interesting with what we're doing with Kathleen is, for the most part, it is just the top teams and the elite people that can afford to get coaching, right? And what we've done with, and all the pressure that I put on Kathleen to make this an affordable program, right? And I say that tongue in cheek, but I've done that because I want to help the masses at Leading Edge. So I want to have all kinds more people exposed to this program than would normally be exposed to it if they were to get into coaching. I personally believe that everybody should be in coaching, but it's a great place to start, to get a taste for what it is that you're going to learn, to get some systems out there so you can have a certain amount of success. And in fact, that's the way it's worked for a lot of people in Leading Edge, is that they've taken those programs and now I've seen them speak at your events. Because they are moving along in their success.
Yep.
So I think that's really important. So what we're going to do now is try the second wine. So the second wine, Tass is excited. Look, he's done his first wine. He's done his first wine. So the second wine, I'll let you guys try it. This is a Montes Alpha. So this is actually the same winemaker as the Purple Angel. It's also a Montes Alpha. This is a higher end version of their wine. So you guys taste that. By the way, we didn't cheers on the first one there. Let's cheers. Cheers.
Cheers, everyone.
Cheers. Thank you.
nicer bouquet, I think, on this one, Paul.
little deeper bouquet? Is that? I don't have the right language, Paul.
These guys have been, just so you know, Kathleen, this is our 14th podcast. So that means that they have tasted 42 bottles of wine just in the podcast. And you're saying you don't know? You're not an expert yet, Anthony?
I would no. There's always room for training. There's always room for experience. I just like what Tass has said because for some reason it does seem a little.
Tell me what you guys think is different. What's different with that wine? What would you say, Kathleen? These
I don't
guys
know,
got
I thought
nothing.
the second one was a bit more acidic, personally.
Okay, yeah.
And the first was a bit smoother.
Okay.
To me.
Yeah. Okay. And the truth is, when you look at wine and wine tasting, right? So we have our golf tournament, and the people actually try. This year they tried, I think, 16 different wines, right? And then
And some of them tried all of them.
and some of them tried all of them, yeah. And then they get to, longest drive gets to choose first, and they get to take home one of the bottles that they tried. And what's crazy, Kathleen, is that they tried them all, and then they get drawn, and they said, Paul, which one should I take? I said, well, which one did you like? They said, which is the most expensive? I said, what does that matter, right? So with this second wine, it's actually if I can put my glasses on to see. So the first one was a 2014, and this second one is a 2005, right? So it's a much older wine, right? And probably, when you look at acidity or tannins, a lot of times why we decant wine is so that it can aerate and those things can soften, right? And I think that when you taste that second wine, it's more complex.
Yeah.
It's a bigger wine, right?
bouquet, for
And
sure.
and
That's the words.
and so and sometimes when we look at a bigger wine, people will say, well, that one doesn't taste as nice, right? Now, if we're going to have a nice dinner, by the end of the dinner, I think you'll be liking that wine more than the first one, right? Because the quality and the richness is there, but when you taste them at first, it may not be the case, right?
lesson.
And then the third wine that we're going to try, which we're not going to try yet, because Kathleen is too slow on drinking her wine
I don't know
out
when
there.
you were speaking that. I didn't even see that. Just saying.
That's right. Just so you know, you can take a sip of wine anytime throughout the thing, and then we constantly hear me slurring the wine. That's just aerating it in my mouth. That's to taste it, right? So we get that a lot on tape. So the third one is actually a Cabernet Sauvignon, which is a way more tannic grape. That one we're having it last to allow it to aerate a little bit longer and to soften a little bit, right? So that's the difference between a younger wine and an older wine. And then also when you, I don't know how much you guys looked at it, but a little bit, so when we look at a little bit of an older wine, it's not, well, it's not a deeper red, but it's got a little bit of an auburnness to it. And a lot of times when you're looking at wine, and when we do wine classes, the test is the age, the grape, all those things that I was saying that I was going to ask you. You actually have to figure it out in a multiple choice situation, right? So you need to look at the hue and the color to see if it's an older wine, right? So you can clearly see that in the
So
wine.
you would have definitely passed the Coca-Cola test when they were doing the Coca-Cola tests back in the Coke and Pepsi and
Yeah, and I'm just so you know, I'm a Coke. I'm a Coke guy. Yeah, I don't like Pepsi
At all, yeah.
at all.
myself too.
At all.
Myself too.
Right. So now what we're going to do is we're going to move into a little bit of a discussion on the stats and what's happening out there. But I'm going to start with you, Anthony, just in terms of what are, the agents, what's the feeling in the office about what's happening in the market? What are you finding?
A lot of the agents, certainly not all of them, but a lot of them piggybacked on an amazing summer. And I know that relates to the stats, that July was sort of an anomaly. It went up very high. There was an enormous amount of sales, but a lot of people did see what a busy summer. In terms of the feeling in the office, what's happened as well, I would say the last week of August, I don't know, a lot of people are quieting down in terms of the atmosphere. The office was quieter, the phones were quieter. Back after Labor Day, I thought, oh boy, I'm anxious to get going. You're in the office, I'm still quiet. Now, where I'm going with that is I expect things to happen, but guess what? Today, let's start with yesterday, the phone started going crazy. Today, I know we're with Broker Bay, which is an amazing system, but we had about 50 appointments in the queue. What does that mean? It's been busy. The phone's been ringing. A lot of agents showed up at our sales meeting on Wednesday, which was good, right? And you could just see that they're raring to go. So in terms of sales activity, Paul, I think a lot of them did have their success in the summer. The hopeful thing is listings are coming in. If you want to ask, what do I see happening now? I'm starting to see listings coming in. I've got some newer agents wanting to meet with me because it's their first listing. They want to go over it. So you're getting a few phone calls like that. So I'm saying, that's good. Get the listings in. Because in real estate, page 1, chapter 1, when I started in the real estate office, you've got a list to last. But I'm glad that the listings are starting to come in. And I hope so, because you got the stats. Are we down on listings now? We are. So I'm glad to see we're getting some listings.
Yeah. So yeah, just to give the stats for August. So Toronto Real Estate Board stats are 7,711 sales through MLS in August 2019, which is up 13.4% compared to August 2018, where we had 6,997. So the inventory is certain, or the number of sales is certainly up, but the challenge in the marketplace is that at the same time, new listings were down by 3%. And in August, yeah, and we had only 11,789 year to date in terms of listings. So when we look at the market and we start to see a 3% increase in values, it's all about supply and demand. We have the people out there to buy, but we don't have the inventory. So I think that the lesson is that we need to go out there and get properties listed, right?
And that's it. And maybe that's the hopeful side when I see people getting listings. You're kind of hoping if we can pick up more listings and agents can activate and convince clients, get it on the market now, the end result is there'll be more sales. Because obviously the month of inventory must be low as well.
Yeah.
So.
Inventory is certainly off. What when you're doing coaching, and do you still coach people yourself, or just a few of the top people that you started with, right? That won't let you go, right?
Yes.
That insist.
Well,
right?
and I love them, like they're amazing, but yeah, just not very much, a very little bit.
Okay, and how do you deal with coaching clients, just in terms of the market and the inventory and stuff like that? How do you guys coach around that, or what are your views on that?
I'd say I've always been a little bit delicate about the stats and the news, because I find like we don't make the market. We want to be prepared for any market. So to me, it's irrelevant. So our focus is more on what can we do to move the needle forward? What can we do to help the clients? Who's active? What do we have to, like, how can we match opportunities within the teams? So we really try not to we want to be aware and we want to educate our buyers and sellers, but we want to avoid kind of that, we're in a seller's market, right? They're going to go into multiples. We're not going to get anything. Because I find sometimes we predetermine, but also we'll match two different markets that aren't together, right? Like I'll be on one coaching call and we're talking about that we have all these listings that aren't moving and they're not selling, but then we have all these buyers and no one can find any inventory. I'm going, okay, like let's break this down. Like we're having both negativities and we're mixing them. So we're really careful about what, like being opportunity based and just being pre-trained for buyer's market and seller's market, because a couple years ago or last year when there was a shift, that really helped us because we could pivot, right? We're like, we already know this market. We know what to do. We've done it before. And if you haven't done it before, other people have on the team, and we have before. So we really, again, like flipped the mindset and how we could bring buyer to the clientele in that different market. It was about 4 to 6 months of like heavy mindset investment, and then boom, and just planting seeds like If we had to double our prospecting, we did, right? Like we work with the numbers that are there instead of getting upset or any emotional attachment to them. We just want to say, how do we win? And I know that seems basic, but right? Like if you know how you win, who cares? Like if we have the formula.
There's always enough business.
Well, there is, right? So,
Now, do you have people that are less time in the industry and haven't really been through a changing market? And do they have unique challenges? And how have you dealt with that?
Actually, it caught me off guard a little bit when that happened. I keep saying last year and hesitating, but it was almost before when the shift. But I was caught off guard when people on teams like, but I've never been in a buyer's market, but I've never been in a mixed market. I'm like, what do you mean? I'm like, but you've been trained for one. Right, that was the saving grace. They were all trained in advance for that market. So they weren't experienced in it, but they knew what to do, right? Like so, it was just getting out there and getting their feet wet. But yeah, absolutely, there are many more people, and I don't know why it wasn't even on my radar, to be honest. And I love a buyer's market personally. Like our systems are very strong in a buyer's market. We clean up. I was like, this is great. I was ecstatic. It took me a while to convince them to be ecstatic, but I don't know, I was.
Right, very good. How about yourself, Taz? How are you finding things at the office? What's the feedback?
I'm sitting here thinking and agreeing with you, Anthony, that, but I think I have a new measure now, because in the last week of August, I think the new measure is going to be, what's the traffic like when I'm coming down the 404 and I hit the DVP? Because a week ago, there was almost no traffic, and I thought, what's going on here, right? There's no traffic on the DVP, right? And like straight down to the office. So, and of course, nobody was working. I found the last week of August, there wasn't a lot of activity. A lot of the realtors weren't around, and I think also a lot of the buyers and sellers weren't around, right? It's probably the most popular week to be off work, right? Yes, and since then, I think as soon as September hit, the first couple of days, I think everyone was adjusting to, okay, kids back in school, whatever, but everyone seems to have this spring in their step and like, okay, let's go, right? And even the people that I spoke to in August, it seemed most of them were prepping their clients for September. They're like, okay, fine. Oh yeah, I just got a call. This guy wants to sell. I told them, okay, we'll touch base first weekend of September, right. Or we're getting it staged and whatever, right? Yeah. So I agree with you, Anthony, that August was, I would say, better than usual, but it's slowed down towards the end, and there seems to be a lot more activity in the office this week, right? So I think that's all positive. And going back to the stats, I think we need to get more listings. There is still broken record. We've talked about this. More challenges in places like Markham and Unionville and Richmond Hill. But I'll tell you, just 2 weeks ago, so one of our agents at Winford, so bungalow in Scarborough, 18 offers, right? That's crazy. Like that's back to the
well, yes and no. So depends on how much below market did he list it at. So you can create that situation.
Yes.
So right. So was it?
He was below market, Paul. Right. What's interesting is even with the 18 offers, I think it went for a little bit over 100,000 over ask. Okay. Still not as crazy as the crazy times, right? So although what it's telling me is people are still going to pick a price that they think that this property is worth, and they're still going in even though there's 18 offers. So he said more than half of them were at asking price or just slightly over asking price, okay? And then there was some that were substantially over, even though he was underpriced. I think he was listed at $699. And it sold somewhere in the 800s, right?
Maybe it should have been $799.
But I think the point is, Anthony, there's minimum supply, right? So 18 offers on a bungalow in Scarborough tells me that we need more bungalows for sale in Scarborough, right? That's the bottom line, is it not? Right? So
you guys keep going. I'm going to start making some calls.
Yeah.
Okay.
So there you go, right? And again, I think, again, to sound like a broken record, I think a lot of that also has to do with the price point, right? It's under $1 million, all kinds of activity. I had another agent mention to me, they have a client looking in Newmarket. And again, he said anything that was under the million mark, seems to be a tight little squeeze of product, right? And then as soon as you pass it, he says, if you're at like $1.1 million, $1.2 million, he says there's like so much more product to pick from, but even his buyer is stuck on that, no, I can't be over $1 million, right? So really interesting, right? The price point is very important. Yeah.
So just picking up on what you were saying about in the same marketplace, you've got some of your clients saying, you know, we can't find anything, and other people saying, you know, we've got, you know, too much inventory. We have now, through the Toronto Real Estate Board, we have a program called Trendly. I don't know if you've heard of it or not. Most agents don't know about it, but it is really a way to drill down into specific geographic areas and look at what the trend is in those areas. And the idea with it, Kathleen, is that you know, agents look at the whole market, or we look at the GTA, or we look at 416 and 905. The truth is, there's Sherwood Forest, there's, you know, there's all these little small areas, and we really need to start looking at those and analyzing those. And when we look at our buyer program that we do with you, what we're teaching our agents in there as well is that part of buyer education, which is so important, is also using that tool to actually add to that buyer education. So it's not just about going out and looking at what's happening and showing them some comparables, but also having that analysis and giving them that detailed analysis for that micro area that they're looking at, right? So it's interesting. The other thing that I wanted to sort of pick up on or talk about a little bit, to do with the market and inventory and where things are going, is Bank of Montreal put out an article that we're moving towards 0% interest rates, right? And we haven't hit those yet, but I just want to touch on an interesting article that I was reading, you know, about Denmark and Switzerland. And in these particular markets, they actually have negative interest rates. And a lot of times people say, well, that's not possible. And what they have is you borrow $100,000 and you pay back $96,000. So how can that be possible? You're thinking. You're in, yes. But why this is important is that also interest rates are changing and how that's affecting the market. But just to give you guys the understanding of how is that possible, right, is that banks in general are charging clients to hold their money. In fact, in Denmark, if you have 500,000, they're charging you 0.6% is the cost to hold your money. So they're not giving you an interest rate, they're charging you to hold your money. The other thing that really spells out how this works is that really the mortgage business is the banks are making the difference on what they can get the money for to what they charge you for the money. So if they can borrow money and get back $10,000 on 100, then they can lend it to you and give you 4,000 of that back. So that really in essence is and it sounds crazy, but it is an article that is what's happening in Denmark, in Sweden, and we're really moving towards that. And the marketplace with trade wars, and in fact in Europe we've been at 0% interest for a number of years. You know, they've not been at negative, right? But there's a few economies that are trying it. So when you look at that, so if I can now make money if I borrow money, how many people are going to be out in the real estate market? What effect is that going to have on the real estate market? Okay, talk amongst yourselves on that.
What do I think? See, I'm probably wrong. Okay.
Well, I'll correct you after you speak. It's all good.
we had our mortgage people in at the meeting, and some of the talk, the rates are this, the rates are low, and there's a prediction. No one has a crystal ball, but they may soften year end. Even next year, they might even be lower. And my thoughts are, if the rates are a little lower, it does generate more sales. So if interest rates are going to be 0%, that's it. Get off and buy. And that's the extreme. To me, I don't understand 0%. I don't. But what I've experienced is that when the rates went down, more buyers were able to buy, come off the fence and buy. So if your question is what will that do to the market, to me, it should increase sales. And I'm probably wrong. Correct me why I'm wrong, but I may be thinking outside the box.
I think that you're absolutely correct, that if the cost of borrowing is lower, then more people are going to get out there and buy.
I think it's an affordability factor, Paul, right? So if the rates come down, then that makes sense, right? So if that allows you to qualify for more house, because some of the challenge, going back to that $1 million mark in Toronto, anyways, is that what you qualify, I make X amount of dollars. So this is how much mortgage I qualify for. Add my deposit. Well, guess what? If it's not, X, then I can't buy in Toronto, right? So I think it will improve the affordability, right? And that's interesting because, when you said the fact that if a bank is going to charge someone to hold their money, that's how they do it. That makes 100% sense because I think, from a commercial standpoint, what do investors look at? They look at what's the spread between how much I'm going to borrow the money for and what my cap rate is. That's all they care about, right? So if they can borrow for less, then they can buy at a more aggressive cap rate because they're borrowing for less. And they're just looking at the gap.
Property back.
Yeah.
And a lot of times they're actually borrowing from the Bank of Canada or the Fed in order to provide that money. So it is really just the difference.
Yeah.
So what's your take on crazy interest rate talks and?
Well, I mean, I would think a couple, like your example in Denmark, I mean, if they're charging you money to have your funds and savings, it's really going to flip things. I think anybody who had liquid assets or in a bank account is going to want to take it. So it's going to reverse risk, right? So for people who falsely think it's safe to save are now going to pull their money and put it into the market. So I agree. I think it would increase sales. I also think it would increase prices. So the wealthy would invest. I think it would elevate prices. So all of a sudden you can afford more because you're paying less in interest, but you can't get in the market again. So I think it would promote growth in the market because it would pull money out of the banks and put them into the market. So I would think they're trying to spark the economy, but I don't know that it would really help the lower purchase buyers personally.
I think you hit on a key point is that it's going to cause prices to rise, right?
Yeah.
Now, it's also interesting, so even if we had negative interest rates, when you look at our stress test, so if you can borrow money at negative 0.5%, you still have to qualify at 1.5%, right? Because that's the stress test. But yeah, it will certainly affect the market. So when we look at this, the lesson to our agents is that, hey guys, if interest rates are going down, prices are going to rise, so get your clients out and get them into properties now.
Mm-hmm.
That's correct.
And we look at, talking to realtors and saying, is it a good time to buy? And lots of realtors always just say yes, right? And I always caution them to say, it's not always yes. It depends on what your situation is, right? Mm-hmm. But for the most part, when prices are going up, if you're an investor, then yes, it's a great time to buy. So it's interesting to look at all of these factors in terms of how they affect the marketplace, right? Yeah. And do you get into and I think sometimes agents get a little bit hung up on this, right? So the truth is that if you're working hard, if you're active, then you're doing transactions, right? And it's interesting when the market slowed a little bit. I think a lot of our top producing agents did more business. So the good, right, did more because people were being more selective. So the lesson there is to get into coaching and be good.
Well, I think it's also they saw the opportunities in the market, whereas I think some of the agents who weren't doing as much volume, or they weren't as confident with why should buyers buy right now, why should sellers buy right now, right? And I think with I think you hit on like the investment side is really important. In our network this next year, even longer, we have a huge focus on wealth creation investment, like actually serving our communities of our databases, because for teams, it's like they have these massive databases, but they're not reaching out, they're not talking to them. So like it's a win-win to help people invest, and people feel good about calling their clients to help them do that, and it's a sound investment. So I mean, I think with changes like that, like call your past clients, help them invest, help them see it's a really safe option for you. It's much safer than not investing.
It's real estate.
Well, you know, we have people, you need to retire, you have kids that need to go to school, we have a lot of single parent family, like you need options, right? And that equity helps you have options.
I think on that note, sorry to jump in there, Paul. I have one of our realtors, and I think he's brilliant for doing this. What he does is he looks for something where he sees an opportunity, meaning he's doing the math backwards and then selling it to his network, like what you described. So he finds something and says, okay, here's this condo. I already know that at this price, I can rent it out for X amount of dollars with this much down. This is going to carry. So then he actually proactively does all the math, and then he just puts it out to his sphere of influence and says, guys, this is positive cash flow of whatever, $40 a month with this much down. And it's working. It's doing great for him because he's just doing the homework ahead of time and putting the opportunity in front of them instead of waiting for someone to say, hey, I think I want to invest in real estate, right? So you see that even on social media. Oh, wow, that condo looks great, and it carries itself with $80,000 down. I'm going to call the guy. So,
Yeah, certainly.
again, proactive.
And the analytical investor or client is looking at the numbers. So just give him the numbers, right?
Give him
He's
the
not
numbers. That's all they wanna see.
he's not really investing in real estate. He's investing in an investment. So they're talking to the right thing. And I think that you guys use, I guess, DISC. Is that what you're still using, or?
We do use personality profile.
Right. Do you use DISC or something different now? Yeah. And how do you find that helps agents to figure out who it is that they're dealing with and how to communicate with them?
Well, I think it helps in a couple of ways. Like that example with the investor, I was going to say, like we have agents who aren't that comfortable with the investment side of it, so they refer to an agent who's really strong. They still get the referral back, and that agent thrives on, here's my portfolio of investments, here's what you can put down. And we have like agents who do it with agents all across Canada. Will refer to them. He actually sends out newsletters that their agents can kind of copy and put in their own branding and send to their own people. So it's just like plug and play referrals, right? So they're still the main go-to. But we use DISC for reasons like that. So if the agent's not that confident, like a C personality with analytics and details and things like that, maybe to get some support, but also knowing with the client, because those people have the highest threshold for data to make decisions. So it's really important when we're with them. They do require a lot more information, whereas some personalities, if we give them all this data, they're just like, they're not going to do anything, right? They're overwhelmed. When we're overwhelmed, we do nothing. So we use it for hiring, we use it for recruitment, we use it for adapting to our clients, we use it for knowing ourselves. I always joke that until I knew myself, I couldn't figure out why everyone else was so weird, right? My personality is like less than 2% of the population. Myers-Briggs, less than 1% of the female population.
I've not heard you say that one before, but I like that.
It's true. It's true. They did my Myers-Briggs one. What do you mean 0.8% of the whole world for women? I was like, okay, like that makes sense. But it helps, right? Because it helped me to understand why I approach things differently. Well, it does. I'm not even kidding. So I was like, okay, like this is, then your unique way of seeing the world. And it's like, okay, it makes sense. So now I adapt much more to other people. And I find our agents do as well. Yeah.
Sure. So the other thing that I wanted to touch on a little bit is when we look at the inventory shortage. So there's obviously not as much resale homes on the market. So it's also interesting at the same time that there's not as much resale homes on the market, the majority of multifamily residential, so not just the condo market. So the condo market has always, for years, offered significant commissions on selling their product. And now we're starting to see the towns, the stacked townhouses, and even some detached product where they're offering significant commissions. So I think that this is a huge opportunity for our agents, if they can't find the inventory, to look at this inventory and see what's going on there. And I pulled out an article just looking at the condo market. And the condo market is quite unique because in 2008, when we had the financial crisis in the U.S., we had a little bit of a 5-month stall in Toronto and a little bit of a lowering of things. But the condo market, even through the 2017 sort of change and downturn in the residential market, did not see that same downturn. It has continued to climb. And they talk a little bit about, why that is. And a big reason as to why that is the higher priced properties, being the detached, suburbs, those homes remain such a high price that really only thing that people could afford was the $500,000-$600,000 condo market. So if there's more buyers for that market, then the prices aren't going to lower for that end of the market. And really what's happened is that there used to be this gap where you had condo market here, detached market here, and now that difference has shrunk significantly, right? So the market has continued to climb, and the question is it going to continue, right? So that's why we brought Kathleen onto the show today to find out, is the condo market continue going to go up, or is it going to change? What do you think? And I'm just teasing
But
you.
joking aside, I saw a home advertised just yesterday or today where the agent did a fantastic job of actually doing just that, saying, hey, this is how big this bungalow is, this is how much it costs, this is a square footage, this is a condo. Mind you, it was like ground floor, but on the waterfront, they're going, you're getting much more space for your money, you're actually getting better value in the condo because he's trying to draw additional buyers over. So I mean, you could do it both ways, right? But
Wow, interesting. Yeah. So the other thing that is interesting with this is that I went to a presentation with Daniels today, and we're a platinum brokerage with Daniels, so we have access to this project, and this is called the Thornhill. So it's a master plan community at Bathurst, just south of the 407. They offer for agents 4% commission. They have 723 units available. So inventory is low. This comes out in October. The inventory is there. So the other challenge in our marketplace is that I myself have my mother-in-law that lives in a 3,500 square foot house in Thornhill by herself. And there is so many clients out there that have way much more house than what they need, right? And I've said to my mother-in-law, should start renting out rooms. Maybe we should just sell our house and move in with you. She didn't seem to like that idea, but the concept though is that we really need to be talking to these people in that situation that have too much house to have them move to the condos, right? And what that does is that we're trying to get inventory, so we're trying to get people to list. But what happens is people don't sit around the house and say, I think we should sell our house. What they do is they look at, where are we going to go? So I think that every agent that's trying to list real estate should be going out with this information on the Thornhill. We've got all the floor plans, all the price lists, and saying, here's the alternative. Come list with me, right? So we really need to offer them the solution so that they can have a reason to get out there and list. So it's available. We're going to post it online, but I think it's an excellent thing that our agents need to be doing. Steve, I think we're going to look at now some questions
Absolutely.
from our esteemed listeners.
Absolutely.
And what questions do they have specifically for Kathleen, or you can ask any of us questions, but I think the questions are all for Kathleen. We got to put her on the hot seat. Also, Kathleen, before you ask a question, I've just got to tell you that we're ready to try our third wine. So if you like the first one best, you need to finish it so that you can try your third wine. So get lubricated before the question comes.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Oh, okay.
Perfect.
Paul, you're absolutely right. For some reason, they were more interested in Kathleen than you guys for,
Okay, there you go.
this round of questioning. Strange, right?
I'm not drinking this all fast before he asks me those questions.
Are you sure you don't want to do a chug?
No,
Chug before?
no, I don't. No.
All right. Well, Kathleen, thanks so much for being here, by the way.
Yeah, thanks for having me. For sure.
So first question here, and people seem to be really excited that you were that you were coming on. How has your training changed as we've shifted from a seller's market, or shifted from the seller's market that we were in previously?
Well, I was saying during the show, I mean, we pivoted. I don't think we changed. We pivoted to other systems that we use in a mixed or buyer's market. So we went back to, you know, what do we need to focus on to help buyers get more engaged and get more confident? What do we need to do to tighten up our pricing when it comes to our listings? You know, do we need to go back to predetermined pricing strategies with our sellers and make sure that we're really educating them on the risk of overpricing, and putting them in an educated spot where we're keeping them constantly informed? Because as a seller, to me, if I'm not informed and it costs me money, I'm going to hold responsibility or be frustrated with that. But if you're telling me information and I choose to keep my price the same and I take a hit, now I'm not really blaming the agent for that situation. So it's a lot of education for the buyers and the sellers so they can adjust as quickly as us.
Excellent. What do you feel the most effective prospecting method is? And I know this is a very personal question, but for you personally, what do you feel like it is?
Well, you just caught the answer with that. It is a very personal question, right? I have people who absolutely love door knocking. Do I feel it's the most effective, efficient way to prospect? No, but if you're good at it and you're going to get results from it and you hate being on the phone and you don't want to do it and you get no results, then hey, maybe for you door knocking is your best prospecting. So we match it with the client. In a team environment, it's a little bit different. They might have opportunities given to them that they need to get results for. So in that case, we try to motivate and help them be able to convert. But for me, the best prospecting technique, I think it's the old school. You still need 3 pillars and you need to be able to work them all and you need to be able to convert any opportunities coming to you.
Excellent. Let me see here. I thought this was a great question. How do you see the role of a real estate agent changing in the next 10 to 20 years? I guess as technology evolves, how do you see the role of a real estate agent evolving as well?
Well, I mean, I'm really excited about the changes because I think they present a lot of opportunity to elevate the professionalism of our industry, you know, for the public. I think they present a lot of opportunities for agents to have more mentorship, more coaching, like team environments allow us to do that. And teams more and more will have the budgets to be able to invest in the technology platforms that are more and more going to be offering us the opportunities that are available. And I think those platforms are also going to be publicizing, do you want me to look there? I think they're also, sorry, I don't know where you're going. I think, like,
this is super casual, so you can just
Yeah.
relax and do your thing.
it'll look really bad if my eyes are like
That's
this.
why Paul gets everyone wind up, just to
Yeah, okay.
your wine while you were
That's okay, good idea, thank you. But no, like these technology platforms are also going to be publicizing our results, right? So like your statistics are gonna be there for the public. And for me, if I was a doctor, a lawyer, accountant, I wanna go under a team who knows what they're doing and leverage that expertise with the public. And I think it just presents a lot of opportunity for really high level training and high level agents who bring a lot of value to the market personally.
Okay, fantastic.
Right.
That's
I'll get you to pause there. So what I did, Kathleen, while you weren't looking, is I took your first wine, okay, and now, yes, now I poured it out. So I didn't drink it out of your glass. I poured it into my glass, just in case you were concerned. So now you have the third wine in your glass on the left. So we're gonna take a second to try the third wine because this is. What I think is the most important part of the show is trying the third wine. And this is the Cabernet Sauvignon. So this is, Tass!
There you go. I'm cut off. Sorry.
That can happen.
I hope we got that on film.
You got a little bit of it anyways.
All right.
So I'd like you to put on there headline, Janakakis drunk again.
Drunk again, yeah.
Tassus, can you
and-
give me a smile that we can freeze frame? There we go.
Is that the first break since you've been doing
That's
it?
the first break since we've been doing it. You're making Tassus nervous, Kathleen.
It has nothing to
Clearly.
do with number 13, does it?
Why? What's number
Is this
13?
your
Oh, is that the
13th?
Is the 13th podcast? Okay, there we go. We were going to film this actually next Friday. Next Friday, right? You know, next Friday is Friday the 13th, right? So I just want to touch on, market changes and talking, a little bit about significant changes or I guess changes that are extremely significant in the marketplace. So when we look at the U.S., we have the iBuyer, which is a huge part of the U.S. market now. So Open Door is a company that is primarily an iBuyer company. They're purchasing in the U.S. 1,400 homes per month. And their concept is that you just email the brokerage and they send you an offer and they buy the property. We also have Zillow is doing about 400 purchases a month. OfferPad, which is also a similar concept, is doing about 250 transactions a month. And Redfin, which is now in Canada, is doing about 40 iBuyer transactions a month. And the idea with the iBuyer program is a lot of times agents in coaching or in any programs always are talking to the client about, do I buy first or sell first, right? And I guess it depends on how the market is, but the reality is if you need the money from this house to buy the next house, I think that you need to know what you've got, right? So selling first is what I usually recommend to people. So what this iBuyer program does is it allows people to go ahead and purchase whatever they want because they know what they've got in terms of the sale of their home. In general, an iBuyer offer is about 9% less than market value. So it's taking a 6% commission and about a 3% premium. And for the most part, the price range that has been popular with iBuyers is the $200,000 to $300,000 range. So when people are in a higher price range, they tend to not be going with an iBuyer program. It's also interesting that only about 10% of the people that are asking for this offer are actually taking it. The other 90% are listing with somebody. So these companies are really doing this in order to look at the best lead gen ever. I'll buy your house, right? And there's companies that guaranteed sales price, and I'm sure some of your teams that you coach are using that concept, and it's a great concept to use. The other interesting thing with this is that there's a bunch of articles that none of these companies, Open Door, Zillow, OfferPad, Redfin, none of them are offering this program in Seattle.
It's all over the States, but not in Seattle.
But not in Seattle. Now, so great. You should ask why, Anthony. That's a great lead-in question, because Seattle has a huge acquisition cost in a tax. Okay, and this is why I don't believe that iBuyer is going to be a challenge in the Toronto marketplace, because when we look at City of Toronto, you're looking at a $36,000 land transfer tax on $1 million property. That's adding 3.6% to that. So you now have got to be at 12.6% below in order to accommodate that. So it makes it really not practical. So I don't see it happening. And the point that I wanted to make with the iBuyer is that everybody is freaked out in the U.S. about this program and the companies that are offering it. And recently, Open Door decided that they didn't want this as an exclusive program. That if Anthony Bungaro is at Century 21 Leading Edge and he wants to take in an offer for his listing appointment, Open Door will give you an offer to take in. So they're originally set it up that it's an exclusive program as to why you should call them, and now they're making it available to all the agents. So they're allowing you to partner with them, and if they take the Open Door offer, you're going to be paid a small fee, but the idea is that you can go in with the confidence that you can take in that offer.
You're giving your seller the options now.
Yeah, you're giving yourself the options. The other thing that's interesting with it is when you look at pricing the property, right? If Open Door is going to give you an offer of $270 because the value is $3, right? They're helping you in your presentation. Right? Because here's what Open Door is going to give you. So I think it's a win-win for agents, right? What do you guys think of iBuyers? You heard it. I guess nobody. Do you coach anybody in the U.S., Kathleen?
Yes, we do.
Yeah.
Chicago.
Have you had anybody
Colorado. Yeah.
having challenges with that, or not heard much about it?
No, because our understanding is the same. It's kind of a loss leader, right? Whereas a guaranteed sale or trade up program, I mean, you give consumers the options they want, and then when you come in and educate them, they pick what's best for them. And I think buyers and sellers are very intelligent people, right? And particularly in Canada, and they're going to pick what they think makes logical sense. So I would assume that the agents going in with those opportunities are well trained in, the psychology of decision making and the paradox of choice. And there's a lot behind how people make decisions, right? And when you present information a certain way, my experience with guaranteed sale or loss leaders or anything like that, or people do usually move away from them because it's not worth the hit, right, to get the extra security in the end.
But I think, just as a fly on the wall, from a brokerage standpoint, I can see the possible value in it. If the brokerage has the funds or the money or the to buy properties, it's not just so much, you said how many are actually bought. I think it was 10% or whatever your number was. But I could understand, as running a real estate brokerage corporation, you could get a lot of business from this, listings. So I think that there's an upside if it worked. I don't know if this would work in Canada. I think in Toronto with the high tax in the GTA, but are they in Canada as well at this point or no?
So Redfin is a company that is in Canada. I don't believe that they're offering an iBuyer program in Canada yet. They're just new to the marketplace, so it's not something that they start with.
But it probably will come.
It's possible, yeah. But it's interesting. So you look at agents that are on the top of their game, and you look at any of these things as an opportunity, right?
Yeah.
So here's the opportunity that I see with an iBuyer, is that a lot of agents deal with investors, right? So if you think about the iBuyer program, if you were to go to your investor clients and say that if I can sell you a property at 5% below market value, how many of those would you buy? And you put together a pool of buyers that are interested in that, you now can start offering your own iBuyer. Really, it is a investor type sale. And I think that in Kathleen's program, I don't know if you continue to do that, but you look at here's what the investor would pay. Did you have that in your thing in terms of the buyer presentation, or am I thinking somebody else?
Oh, there's...
You used to have that, right?
There's
Yeah.
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah, so investor would pay, here's what, market value, and based on time and price. So if you want to sell quickly, you got to take the investor price. And this is exactly what this is. If you want to sell quickly, you take the iBuyer price or the investor price. And I think that agents should bring that back into play. And when you look at who's buying these properties, right? So it's not that real estate companies have hundreds of millions of dollars. I don't want people to get the wrong idea, right? Is that all of these companies are raising funds. So it is a public offering to raise hundreds of millions of dollars to buy these properties, right? So that's what's happening. And for the most part, these are companies that are buying the inventory and then listing them with their agents. So they're really just buying the inventory to sell, right? But I think it's important that that we're paying attention to this and that we know what's happening and is that coming to our marketplace, and certainly not in Toronto. I actually have no idea because I'm from Toronto, but if you go, and I guess in Ontario we have a land transfer tax for everybody. In Toronto there's double, but I have no idea if the other provinces have land transfer tax. Do they all have it?
I don't know.
Kathleen, do you know?
I'm trying to think if I do know from any of my clients in the other province.
This is usually when we ask Steve. Steve, can you check that? But Steve is, I think he's working.
I think the other factor here in Toronto anyways, Paul, is we have a very, very active market, right? So there's a lot of turnover. There's no problem in really selling your house. If you're priced right, you're going to sell your house. I think there's places, especially in the States, where it's normal to have your house on the market for a year, 2 years, right, to sell it. We don't get that here. We're like, what do you mean 2 years, right? That's impossible. But I think there's markets in the U.S., obviously smaller markets, and where the prices are cheaper, where they're depressed, and there isn't that flow of buyers. So in a place like that, I think that a program like that would make a lot more sense, right?
Right, and the reality is, though, if then the market is depressed, then the values they're going to get is
less. It's not going to be 7%. It'll be, yeah.
But I think those people are more prone to take that option, right? Here, I think it's like, well, you know what? If I really want to get rid of my house, I'm just going to reduce the price 5% and I'll sell it, right? So.
Well, it's always that question, if your house is going to sell anyways in Toronto, like why do you have an agent and pay 5 or 6%? Like how do we educate on our ability to adjust supply and demand so that somebody might take an iBuyer and we might have an agent signing it for a 6% listing, right? Just understanding how we can finesse the outcome for them. Yeah.
For sure.
It's interesting when you look at, I suggest to agents that they should talk to their sellers about why is it that a condo developer that has 300 units to sell will get 1,200 worksheets, so 1,200 people wanting to buy those 300 units, and that they will still pay 4% to realtors to sell them. So why are they doing that? And that's why we actually charge too low of a commission, because what we create with the real estate industry is that we create that situation in Scarborough. Is it Scarborough where you had 18 offers? You can't do that on their own. If only 2 people know you're selling your house, you can't get 18 offers, right? So the industry exists because there is value in exposing your home to a huge number of people and having a huge number of people that are interested in buying it. That's why the industry exists. And I find it amazing that agents don't get that. Right, and we have agents that are trying to lower the commission, right? And really they should be working it in the other direction. I think when you look at a lot of the top teams, they seldom cut commission, right? That's something that most of them don't do. Or do you have a lot of teams that are selling based on that they're the lowest price? Or not really?
Based on the lowest price. Well, definitely, I think the ones who are really successful with high listing inventory are looking to move that inventory, but not necessarily at lower prices. Like they're effective with their pricing strategy is what I personally believe. Like they're not sitting higher and coming down. But we have a mix. Like we have top teams who are, like I said, half of them doing those 6% listings very effectively still all throughout Canada. And then we have others that still will do an adjustment if they're buying and selling. That can get complicated in a team environment. I always recommend not to do it if it's an outside agent bringing the buyer, because they don't really like to be penalized for their buyer showing up that they did that hard work. But no, it's usually a mindset thing, and I think it's like we work in models, right? So if you can present a model and people understand it and they buy into it and they understand their value, they'll pick within that model. And for us, our commission structure is a model. That's how we present it. It's visual, it has logic behind it. So I find once we kind of move to that, we don't have a lot of commission cutting, or we're at 5%. Like we're maybe not at the goal, don't get me wrong. Like we're not 100% of the time there, I'm not saying that. But we're definitely still 50, 60% in some of our teams for sure. Yeah.
You know, it's interesting on commission. So a lot of times agents have this idea that, oh, I'm only 5%. And I say to them, okay, so your average that you get is 3.8%. Right? That's the average commission that you get, but you're trying to take this position. So instead of saying that I only take 5%, if you're at 3.8, let's try to get to 4.1. Let's try to get each person a little bit higher, and let's move it in the right direction. And I think that when you look at commission, the other challenge is people's ability to show their value proposition, right? And we try to do a really good job with our concierge and a lot of the programs that we're doing as a brokerage to show that value proposition, because that's in turn what the agent is going to show. And a big part of our value proposition is you, right? It is. It is.
Well, but it's
making
unique.
you blush.
No, but it's unique to your brokerage. Like I go into a lot of brokerages, and I do say all the time that leading edge invest in training, you have a growth mindset culture, and that's why I love training there. That's why I still come back there and build unique programs for you guys, because honestly, like it's like a team environment, and I believe in team, right? So it's very easy for our systems to operate here, whereas often it's not the same. There's a lot of competition. It's still very isolated. There's not a lot of training, and it's not consistent. It's very difficult. The resources just aren't there, and the brokerage, and it's not easy to have the funds to give those resources to agents, right? So yeah, no, I think it's phenomenal. Yeah.
Good. So Steve,
Yes.
do we have any more questions for our guest this evening?
Illustrious guest.
Yes.
I think we absolutely do. I'm going to go over closer to that shotgun mic
Okay, perfect.
so people can actually hear. You can, Kathleen. You can either talk to me, or you can talk to the guys. Not a problem.
No matter what you do on this podcast, these guys make us all look good, right? They will make Tassus look good, smashing my beautiful Rydell wine glass.
By the way, Tassus, there was already a shortage of wine glasses, and we're never going to get to sample this wine again.
So he was getting over it, but now we're making him feel bad again. It's all good, my friend. Yes. Yes.
All right, so Kathleen. Oh,
So Kathleen, in a team, what pitfalls should I be cautious of? I'm assuming this is somebody recently started a team, just wants to look out for the potential pitfalls that they could run into.
Yeah, I think it's somebody who recently started or who has an established team. I mean, there's a phenomenal number of teams that aren't really profitable, and the team leader's kind of carrying them with their production, and that's not really talked about, I don't think, as much as it should be. They could often make as much money, honestly, just selling on their own. So, I mean, I think the pitfalls, consistently the big ones, there's a consistent three. Like one would be compensation, because if my compensation isn't set up properly, I'm not going to make money as a team leader. I'm not going to have the resources to get my team members busy, and I'm going to start to resent the time I'm spending with them. Like team leader is a full-time role, right? Just like any other business. The other one would be training, for sure. Taking the time to train, preparing the agents. Like as a business owner, I think if I know I can get a return on investment, I'm okay to duplicate that investment. But if I'm not training an agent, I'm setting myself up for failure with that investment, and then I'm shy to put any more money back into the team. So training is like our safety net, so to speak. And the third one is recruitment. The biggest thing that's missing in recruitment, oddly enough, is the value proposition to the actual team members. The team leaders are like, well, they should want to come here and they should keep showing up, but they don't know what to do. They don't know exactly the process, and they're looking to solve problems, right? Just like our buyers and sellers are. And how can we help them live their best lives and reach their dreams by working with the team? Like they're still running a business under the team's business, or with the team's business, not under it. So I'd say those three are the biggest ones. And then one we don't talk about as much is just, we've already brought it up here, but entrepreneur mindset. Like, do you want to be an entrepreneur? Do you love that? Is it worth it for you? I just said to somebody today, if my heart wasn't in it, man, the money's not enough to make it worth it. Like it has to be because I really love it and care about it. And if you don't want that lifestyle, it's not for you. Hey, maybe it's not the best way to go. It's very rewarding, but it's not for everybody.
All right, fantastic.
I'm going to throw a question in there as well that I have. So You know, I think that a lot of times agents look at teams from the standpoint of, I want to do less and make money, so I want to have other people to make money. But I think that the consumer out there is also looking for that team experience. So they don't want this one person that I got to try to find. They want all these people. So do you have people that are getting into the team concept based on that knowledge, or?
Yes, we actually had somebody last year at Summit, like we run Ultimate Team Summit, but we had some, you probably heard their story, Paul, but they actually more than doubled their units last year, which is really cool. So they went from 120 units to just shy of like 300 within 12 months, but they'd coached with us for 2.5 months, but huge takeoff. So we were thrilled, but what I loved about that story was that team leader didn't want a team. He kept saying, I don't want a team, I don't want to do it, I don't want to manage people. And the reason he, in the end, signed up with us and grew his team was because he finally had the realization he would not be able to compete with the level of client experience or service in his neighborhood unless he had a team for resources and specializations. And then he did, and obviously the results were fantastic. He also had a lot of demand, but it was exactly for that. You know, it's the Henry Ford concept, but I like to say with mastery, right? Like if you take whatever, let's say there's 100 things every agent has to do, and on your team, you know, a successful sales agent only needs to learn whatever, 15, 25, like I'm not biasing it, whatever it is on your team. It's a lot easier to get that agent up to a 10 out of 10 when there's only 20, 25 things, and then you have somebody in marketing, you get to a 10 out of 10. So now we've got 10 people are all 10 out of 10 in all the areas necessary. Like that's very difficult to compete with unless they don't know how to communicate the value to the public, and some don't, right? So they have great people, but they don't know how to translate it to value. So yeah, I think the public, when they understand team and it's done well, it's amazing. Some teams, unfortunately, maybe don't make the reputation as good, but a lot do.
Yeah. And I think why I asked that question is that I think that a lot of times the teams need to be using that as their value proposition for agents to join them. Is that, you know, you don't have to do all of those things. You don't have to, you know, provide all of those services. You're just going to specialize in what you do. And if you do that well, you can make lots of money, and you just have these 4 things that you've got to do.
Absolutely.
Right? So
you
so
stay
that's
in
a
your
win-win.
lane.
Yeah.
Like all the little extra annoyance. Like a great team will just keep taking anything that takes your time off you. Obviously, you're just with buyers and sellers. That's it, right? Like consultations, showings, offers, market reviews. That's it. Eventually, not even for some of us home inspections, revisits, those get taken off too.
If I can
Pretty
expand
cool.
on that, Kathleen, from the other side, from the agent side, and I think you'll attest to this, Anthony, what we get asked, I think, very often, especially from brand new realtors, is should I do it on my own or should I join a team, right? That very common question, right, Anthony? Right, so what would you say are the characteristics of someone entering the business that should be looking at team versus doing it on their own?
I'm going to change the question a little bit.
Sure,
I
sure.
think you would want to know the top things to look for in a strong team, because I've seen people go on to make the team choice and go on to a team that made a lot of promises and didn't have the resources or the time to fulfill any of them, and they felt very trapped in there, and they were actually doing worse than they potentially could have done on their own. I think, you know, if you have the opportunity to go on a strong team, you're getting paid to learn. And like, what industry do you get paid to learn? Like, to me, you're going to give me money and show me the top expertise in the industry, the most efficient way. Yeah, good. I'm good, right? I'm going to sign up. Like, it's just going to carve 9 years off my learning curve, right? And that's phenomenal. But if you're a high driver and you don't play well with others and you're not willing to play well with others, yeah, you can't follow somebody else's systematic approach, you're probably going to cause a lot of disruption. You're not going to be happy. Like, those people aren't necessarily going to love being on a team. Team won't love them, right? But particularly, like, if you're more introverted, I think you can do amazing in a systematic team environment. You can be trained to be face-to-face and know exactly what to do, and you can excel, whereas that's hard. Like, I'm not a natural networker by any means. So sometimes people say, I want your training because I can see I don't have to be super outgoing and I can make it work. And it's kind of true, right? I did it 100% for the learning curve, the camaraderie. I think the mindset, if you can find a team who's like high performance environment, sign up all day long because they're going to change your career. Absolutely.
But I like your question. I like your answer. But I like your question because this is very, very common.
For sure.
When we meet new agents, brand new off the press, that's exactly what they ask. So I was listening to your reply. And, you know, I don't think there's a cookie cutter answer, but you have to talk to them with a real answer and see their nature, and sometimes step out and say, look, your first year in the business, do it on your own. Take the training, do all the stuff that we offer as a company, but they might be better on their own. What I encounter with a lot of top or even just good agents, I want to have a team. And they
right away.
well, and let's say an experienced agent, they've been in the business for a number of years, and they approach the management or approach me, say, I want to start a team. And this sounds very basic, and we have the facilities in our company to answer their question. But my question to you is, do you in any of your training courses, because what I'm saying is they ask, what is the structure? How do I do the commission? What about if they bring in listing from their sphere of influence? What about if I handed them a lead? And they ask all these questions, which I'm capable of answering, but truthfully, I'm wondering, do you get involved in that side of it at all, in explaining how structures of compensation and the best way to run it is? Or is this something that it's good for us as a brokerage, since we have the experience, should jump right in and do it as well?
We 100% do get involved with it. We have a lot of our top teams running our compensation models, which has allowed, actually the top team that I know of in Canada right now runs our compensation models, but it allowed them the room to grow as quickly as they did, for sure. I think one of the reasons I like coaching on compensation model is because it changes the mindset of how the team runs. Like we'll have teams saying, well, they're upset because they're giving us 40%. In a healthy team, that conversation is not the same. It's like, this is team business, you're giving them 60%, right? Like it allows them to kind of shift the model and create a base, whereas they don't see it that way. Like everything is piecemeal.
Everybody sees it their way.
Yeah, so we talk about all the different entities that have to be considered with a healthy business model, the same as like a small business. So we step outside of real estate and say, hey, how does the industry do this, right? If you were running a standalone business, who has to get paid? Who do we have to consider, right? Like for it to be healthy, and that allows them to see it differently. For some teams, I actually have to do a budget for them to see it. For them to go, this is how it's playing out. Do you realize this? Because until they see it, they're like, but that's how everyone's doing it.
But I think communication is the key. Where I've seen the breakdown, that was my friend, that was my client, and why are you getting that? And what about, so I think up front, the leader should explain, this is the way it goes. Not just sort of kind of like this, specifically.
Leaving it loosey-goosey
Doesn't
always creates a problem.
Creates a problem, creates animosity. You cannot, and it's not cut out for everybody, but I think it's important that you do have the training, and certainly that's what I tell them. But I will say, speak to the leader, ask those questions, because there's not a cookie cutter stone answer for every single team, because in our teams, some of them run it differently. They're quite differently, right? But where I've seen the problems, Tass, I don't know if you have as well, is like, well, that was my best friend. Well, that was my uncle, and why did they take, 60% or whatever, right? Or I was at the open house, I met the people. Well, like, this should have been discussed up front. So that's why I was wondering if you did that.
Yeah, absolutely. And it makes recruitment a lot easier, because how do you recruit where you don't know where you're taking people, right? It's super confusing. You lose people.
Yes.
Yeah.
What I also think happens with compensation, and I believe in the compensation model that Kathleen teaches, the challenge I have with it is that you have teams that offer no value to their team members, and they learn this model and they try to sign people up on this model. Well, that doesn't work unless
That's not fair.
yeah. So the idea is that if you are providing all of these things, then this is the compensation. And one of the top teams that's in one of my mastermind groups, he does 1,100 transactions. He's got 20 team members, and 4 of those team members do 100 transactions each. Right. But they only get 30% of the money, right? And they're very happy to get 30% of the money because they're doing 4 things, right? They're setting up the appointment, they're showing the houses, presenting the offer. They're done. They're not dealing with financing. They're not dealing, right? The rest of the process is done. And my challenge is that people offer nothing And then, let's start with that, right? And even 50-50 if you offer nothing is probably not fair. And the way I explain it to people is that if the cost of lead acquisition is 15%, let's say that as a number, and you're paying 50-50 just to get the lead. So if that's the only thing that the team does, well, then it doesn't make sense. But if the team has a success ratio of 9 out of 10 when they go on a listing appointment, and your success ratio is 2 out of 10, if you bring 10 leads to the team, then you're going to get 9 transactions, and even if you get 30%, that's 270% of the money. And if you did it on your own at 2, you're only getting 200% of the money. So even if you so you got to really analyze things, and I like to analyze the numbers, and that's the challenge. Is that I think that people are at all different levels and talk about compensation, right? So I think that's a challenge. So Steve, do we have any other questions for Kathleen
We absolutely
this evening?
do, and they happen to be right in the same vein as what you guys were
We're just
talking
talking
about,
about,
actually.
I smelt it.
So this is somebody, they said they're intermediate agent, I'm going to presume about 5 years in the industry, wanting to start a team and curious, it's a two-part question. What should my initial steps be? And how do I pay people? Which I think segues nicely into what you guys were talking about.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think perfect world, right? Not everything is perfect world. Often people already have somebody, like you said, like their neighbor, their best friend, their brother has shown up and they want to recruit them. So like, we need to get this done now. We need a contract, we need compensation. The difficulty with that is we don't necessarily understand the contracts we're putting in place or the systems that we're going to provide or what our obligations are. So I mean, best thing is to learn the systems in advance, I find. So our most successful has been people, okay, we're going to learn compensation, we're going to develop our team member agreements, we're going to understand it fully. Now we're going to recruit the right person. Or, hey, we're going to bring this person on, but now we see we're going to do it differently with the next one. So we'll grandfather one person. For us, that's the most successful way to do it, because if you're trying to bring somebody on immediately and train them all at once and you don't have the systems or know what to train them on or how to pay them, that's pretty confusing and stressful, and it's probably not going to last anyway, like even though they're right in front of you. So I don't know if that answered the question, but we'll see. So try to have a strategy and a process before you take the step. That's the easy way of saying it. And how do you pay them? Like, we have a full economic model that we work with. I'm always hesitant to release it for some of the reasons that we've already talked about, because there's systems behind every single step. And to just take an economic model and say, okay, I'm going to pay everybody 30% across the board, that's not the system, and that's not going to motivate your people, and there's all sorts of complications, and a more mature team, their cost of sale will go up. Like, there's all sorts of things that you want to consider. So how do you pay somebody? I think for us, it's either we have within our, and I won't say it now, but within our coaching model, essentially what we've done is taken all the top 1% teams. So anything we work with is only top 1% producers. So we've taken their spans if they use a split, and then we have a flat fee model where it's a split bonus flat fee. It's all a mix. And there's about 58 questions we ask. It's usually 5 to 6 coaching calls for us to develop a custom compensation plan for those teams. And that will safeguard them. But what's really cool about it is whether they're at team building step 1 or they're team building step 12, like team within team, that compensation model is already pre-considered all the hiring steps all the way to the top. And the budget's pre-considered. So it reverse engineers and it forward engineers, if that's a word. So it all clicks together perfectly. So you're not going to hit a snag as you're growing, which to me is really exciting, because it's like we can just keep leveraging and expanding, right?
Very good, very good. So I think that what we're going to do is we're going to thank everybody for joining us on this podcast. And if you have more questions for Kathleen, then you need to sign up for the September 19th buyer program. I don't know what we're calling it. We'll call it the buyer program. It's probably got a name.
It's an intensive. It's
intensive
pretty
buyer
amazing.
program.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. Trainers
Renee's
always
amazing.
keep having new names for
Yeah.
things. But if you want more of Kathleen's time, that's a great way to get it. I would strongly recommend that you sign up for that. The other thing that I want to mention is that we are stepping up our lead gen. We've got a lot of things that we're doing with lead gen. Tass and I have another big meeting on Friday to add thousands of leads a month to our lead gen program, and we need more agents. I like the Austin Realty down in Texas has a website that says, you know, we have these 280,000 additional leads, and we don't have enough agents for them. If you're interested, call us, right? So we want to get into that situation. So we're trying to put ourselves in that situation, and we've set it up that the only way that you qualify is if you go through Kathleen's program. That's how much we believe in it, that we're not going to invest money in lead gen unless you're properly trained. And I think that in the industry, this is the biggest challenge. So when we look at, and we talked about this before, when we look at why people leave for leads, but they're no good, right? They're no good at what they do. So if you get leads and you're no good, you're still no good, right? So you have to be good and get the leads. So we offer both. So I think that's where you should be.
I like that.
What do you guys think?
I think you're right on.
There you go. So thank you very, very much, Kathleen. It is a pleasure. You're the first young lady that we've had on our podcast. So it's, we're excited to have you on here. And hopefully we don't take as much flack as we've been taking for being a boys club. And I just want to really thank you, and I really appreciate you being on and sharing with us today. So thank you very much. I'm Paul Barron, broker of record, Century 21 Leading Edge.
And I'm Tassos Giannakakis. Thank you very much for joining us.
Anthony Bungaro, I had a great time, and thank you very much for being a part of it.
And Kathleen Black, and thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Great, thanks very much. Oh, no problem.
Kathleen, thank you very much for coming.
Bill, Mr. Bungaro.
Paul, thanks very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.